recently we talked a little bit about some of the best unreleased weapon variants within Call of Duty World War II, and it got me thinking a little bit further because in that video we talked about some things that were seemingly canceled, ones that made sense as to why they'd come before, but we've never really seen them come since then, or they were changed around, or some other thing like that that just prevented it from ever coming out to the general public. So that's something that I wanted to discuss a little bit further and really detail a little bit more on some of these other weapon variants that never came to be or were completely changed around and subsequently entirely different towards the end after they were updated. So that said, today we're going to be taking a look at 6 different canceled and completely changed weapon variants within Call of Duty World War II. And honestly, I think these are pretty fascinating. I think that some of this stuff is rather interesting to see that it might be cut content, or perhaps maybe at some point all of these are released to everybody and we see these happen at some point in time, but just as it stands right now, they're unreleased. But regardless, the likely stories behind these weapon variants are they were probably canceled or completely changed, so I wanted to detail them here for you guys in this one. So that said, let's just jump right into it. Starting us off in number 1 is an SMG that a lot of people actually probably didn't realize changed right underneath their noses. We talked about this in that video of other unreleased weapon variants and how it did change around, but for those of you guys that did not know, the grease gun Roxy 2 actually was completely changed. If you were to have gotten this at any point right after the launch of World War II up until right around January, the middle of that month perhaps, you'd end up seeing exactly what I mean here. But the Roxy 2 used to be just a sort of shingles variation of the grease gun where it was more chromatic, it had a little bit more metallic feel to it than anything else, and it just had that chrome vibe to it. And so therefore it also had the ornate designs carved into the metal, but that was something that changed with the Resistance update, because with the Resistance update and the Resistance event that started, we ended up getting a couple of different weapons, the Orso, the Volkssturmgewehr, and the combat knife, and each of those of course had their own separate thematic variations of them that did have to do with the Resistance of some sort. We ended up seeing some imagery for the Polish, Italian, and French Resistance within World War II, but one thing that was changed about with this was that of the Roxy 2 variants of the grease gun. This now, if you take a look at it, it is of course donning some Resistance themes to it, and no longer is that shingles equivalent on the grease gun and chromatic and super ornate. Instead, it's just more so of a battered and beaten up version of the grease gun itself. Now, as for the actual variants, it still is pretty cool. It's still fun to rock if you end up having this variant, but to me, I think the original Roxy 2 was still a little bit better than that of what we have now, but regardless, this was changed out without any real indication that it would be changing to players, and is something that now the original Roxy 2 sits vaulted somewhere to see if maybe the sands of time will bring it back at any point. But that's probably doubtful. But moving on into the second one, let's talk about our first canceled weapon variant here, because again, it does deal with the grease gun, but this one dealing with the Rosie grease gun. Now, it might sound weird to say, well, the Rosie's not canceled, we have the Rosie 2, but I'm talking about the epic variants of the Rosie 2 that we ended up getting. For those of you guys that remember, we ended up having a community challenge to get the Rosie 2 a couple of months back, and we ended up doing it just in the nick of time, and since then, every single player that logged on during that has the ability to play around with that Rosie 2 grease gun variant. However, if you were to search around in supply drops or collections or anything like that for the epic Rosie variants, you would not be able to find it, simply because it doesn't exist. That's one of the weapons that I think was probably up on the deck for supply drop or later in the year release before a community challenge was introduced, and so therefore, as with all other weapon variants in the game, there's always an epic and a variant version created, but we never saw the epic version put out into the mainstream for anybody to get. So in that sense, it was canceled just because the Rosie 2 was given out for free and kind of overshadowed the need for a Rosie epic variant. Now, talking about more canceled weapon variants, let's jump over to the next one, which we debuted a little bit in that video previously, but I want to keep it relevant here so it fits in perfectly, with that being the MG15 Dive Bomb and Dive Bomb 2. So this was one that we ended up seeing that was available to be showcased, and I don't know if you could necessarily choose it and actually play around with it in the custom match little exploit, if you want to call it that, whenever it was available a couple of months back where you could see every single variant. But the Dive Bomb was one that was pretty awesome. It was a sort of shark looking variant of the MG15. It was a much bigger one. It had the massive iron sights and all things that you'd see with a couple of different ones, such as the Blade as well as the Gorilla variants that are there currently, but this is definitely one that I think was canceled more than anything else. Because if you take a look at it, once again, it does have the same exact build of the Blade and the Blade 2, but when you could take a look at these variants in their entirety a couple of months back, it did have the max number of variants available, that being 9 that you'll end up seeing for this. Now, if you jump in, you end up seeing 8 that are available right now with the MG15, and every variant matches up accordingly except for the Dive Bomb and the Dive Bomb 2. And what is it replaced by? Well, another Resistance-themed item called the MG15 Gorilla, which, if you take a look at it, is again the same exact build as the Dive Bomb and Dive Bomb 2, but we do not see either of those, and we see this one in place of it. So again, in my mind, this kind of took out any necessity for the Dive Bomb, which is unfortunate because it looks absolutely awesome, but it sure seems like this one just stepped in the place of the Dive Bomb and Dive Bomb 2, and therefore doesn't seem like we'll be getting it anytime soon. The next weapon I want to talk about is maybe a 2-for-1 actually, that being the Carbon, the Patriot variant. And the reason I say this is a 2-for-1 is because the original Patriot Epic variant was changed via, once again, that Resistance update that we end up seeing. Back before we saw this change out everything, there was the Patriot variant that was more so German themed. You end up seeing not only on the Epic but also the heroic variants of it, the Reichsadler Eagle with the dawning crest of that, plus a little bit more of a clean color scheme with that. However, if you take a look at the current Patriot build, the Epic variant that is available in the game currently, it is donning the Polish Resistance paint job on this, in which it is still the same base mannerisms of it, the same cream and red color scheme, but everything else is a little bit different. We end up having some Polish spray paint, plus the Resistance icons on the side, top, and stock of the weapon as well. So this was one that changed, but as for the Patriot 2, the cleaner heroic version, that actually seems to be canceled as a result of this change out from the Epic Carbon Patriot. So as it stands, this one might be both canceled and changed, so encompassing both of the two things we're talking about here at this one. And to me, it's just rather interesting that the original is now lost to time, but the other may never actually see the light of day. So definitely curious on that one, but moving along into the second to last one, these ones actually deal a little bit both with the most recent community challenge for the 1911 as well as the M1. So firstly, let's talk about the independent Epic variant, because as like what we saw with the Rosie Epic from the first community challenge we saw in World War II, this one was earned in the heroic format. But as for this, we don't ever actually need an Epic version of it, so that's not something that we'll be seeing, and as a result, though one is built, it's probably not ever going to see the light of day, and as such was canceled in the release of these specific weapon variants. Now, as for this, I'm totally okay with that one, because as with the heroic version, it looks so much better than that of the Epic. The Epic's obviously always being dirtier and muddier and not as clean, but this variant is one that I just think needs to be clean and sleek with it. So I'm totally cool that we got the heroic variant, don't get me wrong at all on that, but definitely interesting to see that we won't have any need and may never get that Epic variants at any point through World War II. And that leads me to the final one that I want to talk about, another weapon variant that was canceled, the 1911 American Epic variant, because we did see about halfway through the last community challenge that we ended up getting the heroic American 2 variant, which as the same thing with the independent, there just really isn't a need. There is one built, but we never actually ended up getting that because we have that heroic variant. And again, as with the independent, I definitely think this is one that as an Epic variant wouldn't look good at all, and so therefore I'm totally cool with just having the heroic. Where previously things like the Carbon, Patriot, Epic variant beforehand wasn't all that bad, this one I just feel like you can't have one that upstages it and then one that isn't near as good looking released at a later time. So in that sense, it looks like this one also will be vaulted and we'll never see this one in play as well. But ultimately, while there's a ton that are unreleased and we can't necessarily say for certain have been canceled entirely because neither the Epic nor the heroic variants are out there, there are definitely some that have specific variants that are either changed or that have actually seemingly been canceled because of different locations of weapons that may take their place and other things considering. So that said, that's where we're gonna wrap up this video. Are there any in particular that you guys were looking forward to out of these specific ones we talked about? Are there any you'd like to add on to it? Any that I missed? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I love this kind of stuff, taking a look at things that may never see the light of day or that were changed around for whatever reason. I always find that stuff fascinating, so I wanted to share it with you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you guys did, make sure to drop a like down below, and of course, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding Call of Duty World War II content, anything in regards to, of course, hidden content like this, canceled content, updates, news, best class setups, tips, tricks, all that good stuff we got you covered here up on the channel. So if any of that interests you, make sure that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. And if you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter, that's the best best place to get connected outside of YouTube, practically live on Twitter, so if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, link is down there in the description below. And finally, if you guys want to follow me over on Instagram as well, that link is also down there if you guys want to check that out. Been getting a little more active, and as of you watching this, I am currently on a trip in California visiting some family, so maybe even posting a lot over there at this point. So if you guys want to check that out, that link is as well in the description below. But all that said and out of the way, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you guys had a fantastic day. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care, and peace.